Korea's law on animal protection was framed out in 1991, and for the first time in over 30 years, the law was revised in 2022 with the Enhanced Animal Protection Act put into effect starting April 27, 2023. So what are the details of the revised act? What changes have advocates witnessed amid the presence of this revised act? And how do Korea's efforts to protect animal rights compare to those of its global partners? Welcome to Issues and Insiders for this Thursday, April 25th here in Korea. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we address efforts to ensure animal protection under the revised Animal Protection Act, which went into effect on April 27th last year. For this, I have Professor Cho Hee-kyung at Hongik University live on the line. Professor Cho, it's lovely to have you back.
Thank you for inviting me.
I also have Shin Joowoon with us, joining us virtually from the Korea Animal Rights Advocates. Joowoon, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Professor Cho, let's begin with some details then about Korea's revised Animal Protection Act.
Certainly, as you mentioned, this act has been completely overhauled, actually. The first time it's been essentially overhauled like this in 31 years. And it has introduced a number of important changes to the existing act. I think, in my opinion, most important of which is the changed definition of what constitutes an animal abuse. In the past, the definition of abuse of an animal focused very much on physical abuse of animals, so causing death, injury, pain, or abandoning an animal used to be defined as an abuse. But now it also includes omissions, so essentially neglecting animals, not giving it proper care, that would also constitute abuse. So it's now possible to take action with regard to owners who are not actively abusive towards animals, but who are simply neglecting their animals and not giving proper care. That's a really important change. It also made it compulsory to get permit or license for those who trade in animals, so that it's no longer enough just to simply register and report their business. They have also increased the penalties for infringement of the duties under the law, so that they have, for example, doubled the penalty that applies to abusing an animal from 1 year's imprisonment to 2 years, and the fine amount has also doubled as well. They've also strengthened oversight with regard to laboratory experiments of animals, and also that they have introduced change to allow local authorities to essentially take over the care of animals from owners who are not looking after them properly. So they have really increased the scope and the strength of protection given to animals, which I think reflects the changing attitude of our society towards animals.
Right, indeed. And these comprehensive changes, June, took effect last year. And this coming Saturday, that would be April 27th, we mark the first anniversary of the Act's implementation. What changes has your group witnessed amid the presence of this new revised Act, would you say, June?
Yeah. I think government regulations on animal-related businesses have been strengthened, and issues that have been in blind spots, such as licensing for breeding vicious dogs, temperament testing and evaluation, and also private animal shelters have come within the legal framework. But however, so-called possession ban, which restricts future ownership or possession of animals by those convicted of animal cruelty, was not legislated. Social awareness of animal protection and welfare has increased, but unfortunately laws have not yet caught up.
Right, so that is one place where perhaps we can look forward to some more improvements then. In the meantime, Professor Cho, earlier this month, a man in his 60s was caught on camera assaulting a goose at Konkuk University. It was a disturbing clip of animal cruelty. What legal consequences would you say does he look to face?
Yes, you're right. It was quite shocking. I mean, the man just approached the goose and started beating its head and almost smashing it onto the ground. So that would definitely constitute abuse of the animal. And under the revised act, the man can be prosecuted, and if found guilty, can be liable for up to 2 years imprisonment or 20 million won in fine. But if you look at precedents of similar cases of animal abuse, I fear that he may get off with just a small fine. The fine amount has increased recently, so it used to be some, hundreds or 200,000 won, etc. Now it's in the millions, not just in hundreds of thousands of won, which sounds a lot, but it's really like, anything less than a million won is less than $1,000. But the courts are reluctant to impose very stiff penalties for animal abuse. And so I would guess that in this case, he might be liable for up to perhaps maybe 3 million won in fine, if that.
Right, and keeping this case in mind also, June, reports of animal abuse itself, these reports themselves have actually been on the rise over the past few years. But there have been very few cases, I understand, of punishment. What more can you tell us?
Among violations of the Animal Protection Act, those who cruelly abuse or kill animals are subject to criminal punishment. There is a statistics. As of 2022, 0.1% of the defendants arrested and indicted for violating the Animal Protection Act were handed over to formal trials. And 5.5% of the defendants were sentenced to prison, and 59.6% were sentenced to fines over the past 5 years. So I think the court still doesn't seem to take animal crimes seriously.
Right. And Professor Cho, what can you tell us about how Korea's efforts to crack down or to enhance animal protection, how does that compare to the efforts made by its partners elsewhere?
So what Joowoon said is absolutely correct. Our courts still don't really take abuse of animals that seriously. In fact, there was a case where the judge objected to lawyers representing the owner of animals that were victimized as, the animals died. And the judge said the animals' death shouldn't be called death, but demise, because these are things or objects under civil code. And so this is still the attitude of some of the judges on our courts. So another case example is there was a case a few years ago where a man threw a dog that belonged to his neighbor from the roof of a building. He was given, I think it was 2 million won in fine, whereas a similar case that happened in the US, a dog was thrown off the roof of a building, and the offender was sentenced to 2 years in prison. So now we do have these penalties on the books. It's in legislation. They actually amended the law to allow courts to give stiffer penalties to the offenders. But as Joowoon noted, the conviction rate is very low. And even when convicted, imprisonment is very rare, and the penalties are still lower, which means that recidivism, so offenders who abuse animals continue offending them, and we don't have the provision to prohibit those people from being able to own animals again. In other countries, for example, they would be prohibited from owning another animal for at least some period, maybe 5 to 10 years or forever in cases of severe abuses. And we really should have adopted such provisions in our law as well.
Right. June, as Professor Cho mentioned, animal advocates also, they've denounced the act of regarding animals as objects. Would you like to take this opportunity today to perhaps share your thoughts on this particular matter?
Animals are sentient beings and have their own unique habits. However, due to its legal status here in South Korea as an object, problems arise such as weak punishment, as the professor mentioned, for animal abuse crimes and insufficient compensation for animal damages. Also, due to the limitation of animals being treated as object, it is difficult to properly rescue the animals in danger if the animal abuser does not give up ownership. So to protect the lives of animals, it is, I believe, essential to improve their legal status. And as you know, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, etc., have already stipulated in law that animals are non-objects.
Right. And Professor Cho, in the meantime, do you suppose more can be done perhaps during the process of case investigation to allow for appropriate legal consequences to those who abuse animals?
Yes, certainly. Parallels can be actually drawn to laws relating to stalking. We amended stalking laws to protect better the victims of stalking. And here we have strengthened the law to protect animals better, but courts' attitude needs to change, and also police agencies and investigation needs to change to provide better protection. So, in fact, the police agency has actually revised its investigation manual regarding animal abuse back in 2021 because the existing manual was very thin on actual details of how to proceed and investigate animal abuse cases. It was mostly about the explanation of existing law. So in 2021, they actually went through a great deal of effort and produced this, a tome of an investigation manual which provides great detail and proper procedures on how to gather evidence, information, etc., etc. But the problem is, in reality, they don't have the resources to be able to carry out these proper steps. For example, if there is an autopsy needed of the dead animal, they can't do it because they don't have the means to carry them out. If there is forensic evidence that needs to be carried out, that they still can't do it because they don't have the necessary personnel or resources. So it's well and good to have these manuals in place, but unless they have the resources, funding, and personnel to put them into practice, it's really not much use. So I hope that keeping up with the changes in law, the government agencies will be able to budget and provide better resources to be able to carry out better investigation. Because otherwise, even if offence continue to take place, there won't be any evidence to be able to prosecute them successfully.
Right, indeed. And as Professor Cho mentioned earlier, Chun, these repeated offences are really common as abusers of animals are able to easily access new pets should he or she wish to, I hear. What do you suggest then, Chun, to prevent this very disturbing reality?
Oh, yes. I mentioned above, the possession ban is an alternative to protect animals. Anyone who has been criminally punished for animal cruelty must keep a record, and a system is also needed to check his or her record when he or she adopts an animal. However, in a situation where a significant amount of transactions are taking place between individuals, there is no way for individuals to check whether the person is about to adopt animal has a criminal record. So I think we need to think about how to fill these blind spots.
Chun, this is an impromptu question. Given the concerns we've touched upon today, do you suppose that potential owners of furry friends need to perhaps take on a course on perhaps responsibilities that need to be acquired by potential pet owners?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to have such courses, do you think? Or am I going too far?
Yes, but I think it's not easy. So the government, also just the civil sections like us, have to think about whether it be right way or realistic way.
Right. And Professor Cho, speaking from perhaps as a scholar in the field of law, what are the chances perhaps of putting in a legal requirement where you have a potential owner required to take a particular course on pet responsibility before being able to adopt a pet?
I think it's actually not that far-fetched. We've been talking about how under our civil code, animals are still categorized as objects. And that's a legacy of the continental legal system, which we have inherited originating from Germany. And Germany, Austria, Switzerland, all of those civil code countries have amended their own civil code so that animals are no longer categorized as objects. Also, those countries actually require owners of companion animals to pay taxes, and they also require owners to take training and to show that they can make their animals obey them. And so if you go to adopt an animal, and in fact, one other thing is to actually ban sale of animals on high streets, like something that you can just simply go into a shop and pick up, like a handbag or something. And those kind of changes can certainly be implemented by change of law. And given the changing attitude in our society, I think, give us a little bit more time and we might actually see those changes happening in our society as well.
Right, I'll keep my fingers crossed for that. Meanwhile, Professor Cho, owners of fierce dogs here in Korea, I believe, will soon be required to seek permission to keep their pets after signing up for a liability insurance program and having their pets spayed or neutered. How do you respond to this policy?
Right. So this change was actually part of the new amendments to the Animal Protection Act. Some of the changes came into effect last year, and some will actually come into effect 2 days later, on 27th of April this year. And this new licensing scheme for aggressive dog breeds is one of these new changes. And personally, I actually have some concerns about this because they have designated 5 breeds of dogs as aggressive breeds, and you require specific license. And these include Pit Bull Terrier, I think Staffordshire Terrier, and also one other quite common type of terrier. And the thing is, there's an American agency which tests like the aggressiveness of and temperament of dogs, and they have classified Dachshund and miniature poodles as 2 of the most aggressive breeds in dogs. But these are not categorized as having a requirement of license. And it really depends on individual dogs, because I have seen I have met some of the most friendly Pit Bull Terriers, and I have also met very, very aggressive poodles as well. So it really depends on how the owners train their dogs, how well the dogs listen to their owners. Of course, it's a different thing if these dog breeds are specifically, they are specifically bred for aggression, and they are usually used in dog fights, etc. But if they're kept for companionship, then they are not usually used for that kind of purpose. And to specifically, single out these particular breeds and say, well, these require specific licenses and there is limitation, you have to take out specific insurance, etc. I think that's almost like a discrimination, and you really should have a general requirement of education and training of all owners and all dogs.
Right, and in keeping that discrimination in mind, that is perhaps why debate over animal rights remains very fierce here in Korea. That being said, how should we, Chun, seek to better approach this ongoing debate?
I think we have to admit that animals are also members of our society. And like I said before, scientists are also accepting animals as sentient beings. And now there is I think a need to break away from modern practices like animal use, overuse, or exploitation. Additionally, as there are many different animal species, in zoos or in wildlife, it is necessary to better understand their habits and make human efforts for their welfare rather than simple protection, I think.
Right, and perhaps start on a broader social discussion on the matter as well then. Choon, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Cho, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders. We return same time tomorrow, so do join us then.